you have probably had a chance to read Hank's bio on the website when you're signing up, etc. So I'm not going to give you the official bio because what does the official bio says? It says he's a great lawyer, which he is. It says that he was named one of the best lawyers by many magazines. So all of those accolades. Field and Stream, Outdoor Magazine, Hiker Today, Reader's Digest, all of those are all the ones that matter. All of that is true. I used to work with Hank when we were both at Hummer Winblad Venture Partners, and it was back in the .com days, especially. And so that was a lot of fun. And of course, during the .com days, Hank especially was very well known as not just a VC, but he was also the CEO of a little company called Napster. And at some point in your lives, you should go and ask Hank about all the stories of Napster. But that's not the purpose here today. Today, it's all about term sheets. And there isn't a better person that I can think of who can explain to you term sheets, who can negotiate term sheets both as an entrepreneur, as well as what the investors are going to be negotiating against of you, because he is one, he has been one, and he understands this inside out. How many in this room think you're going to be negotiating a term sheet? So about the same ones. A few people who didn't raise their hand the second time are on the investor side. Of the entrepreneurs, given what's happening in the stock market, how many of you think those term sheets are moving more in the favor now of investors? I think that's the interesting question. When you get a chance, you should ask Hank, what happens when that needle, the pendulum swings over to the other side. The other thing I can tell you also about Hank, by the way, is he's not just a really good lawyer and a very good investor. He's a great business person as well. It was great working with him at Hummer Winblad because you could go to him for, of course, term sheet and all these things, but he also had a very good business sense. And outside of work, he has an eye for art. That's one thing you may never find on his bio, but he has a great, just a really good eye for things that are artistic and especially modern art, if I remember correctly, right? Yeah. Yeah. But with that, please help us welcome Hank Berry.
Well, thanks for Sean and thanks to Ty. I'm so happy to be here. Oh, I get one deck. Sidley Austin is the law firm that I work at, and we're very proud to be sponsors of Ty. And it's an association that we've had for quite some time now, quite happy with it, and hope that it will grow over time. I've been doing this a long time, and I'm very sensitive to what Prashant just said about changing market conditions, because when they change so fast. It's just amazing. We were chugging along here about 4 months ago, 5 months ago, with everything was up and to the right and more money, and yeah, we're raising 50 on 500 pre, and no, it's 60 on 600 pre, and everybody's so excited, and then all of a sudden it's, well, maybe we can do 30 on 300 pre, and then people are feeling very lucky if they can even get a term sheet. So I was thinking about facetiously having my first slide be, don't do it. Don't negotiate a term sheet. If you get a term sheet, you sign it right away. Don't even think about what the terms say, just do it. There's some resources that are on this slide. www.nvca.com is the website for the National Venture Capital Association, and on the website for the National Venture Capital Association they have a tab called Resources, and under that tab is a set of legal documents that are used in, I would say, 90% of the venture capital financings that are done in the Valley, except for the ones negotiated by my partner Deborah Marshall, who insists on having her own forms. That's another issue. It's good to familiarize yourself with those forms, and if only to just get a working knowledge of what the various provisions are, although we'll go through everything tonight that's in those forms. Another one is a book, and it's a book from 1989. You can get it by sending it to me, hbarry@sidley.com. I'll send you a copy. It's a book that was published by the Western States Venture Capital Association, an organization that's long gone, actually been merged into the NVCA. And that book is called The Layman's Guide to Venture Capital Investments, maybe even The Layman's Guide to the Legal Aspects of Venture Capital Investments. And that book, even though it's old, is the best thing that I've ever seen written on the topic, and consistent with my pirate past. I've made a couple copies with the permission of the NVCA, and I can make those available to you. So I want to talk about 3 questions tonight and try to give you some context for term sheets, because we could talk a lot about the individual provisions, and we could go through, and this is a 2x liquidation preference, this is a 3x liquidation preference, how does that relate to other things? But I want to try to give you the context that these term sheets come from, so that you can understand the position of the investor in the term sheet discussions that you're having. Because it really is the case that if you do this right and you engage in a responsible dialogue with an investment firm, by the time you get the term sheet, you should understand where your terms are going to be, and signing it becomes sort of a formality, because you understand the context that that person is in. We'll talk a little bit about the internal process of venture firms. Why does it take so long to get to a term sheet? I've been 6 meetings at this firm, and they all say they like me, and we've been out, and we've had dinners, and they're ready. They all say they're ready to go, but then nothing's coming across the transom. Sense of where venture firms exist in the cosmology of investment in the United States. If you think about pension funds, the California, $1 billion, $10 billion, $10 billion, $295 billion.
Did we connect over there?
Universities do well.
You did?
What's the figure for Harvard's endowment, would you say? 38 billion. Stanford, Princeton, Yale, kind of trudging along at 24, 25 billion or so. A lot of money needs to be put to work. And for each of these large financial institutions, they have to make an allocation across different asset classes. So they're going to have a lot in institutional securities, they're going to have a lot in developing economies, they're going to have a lot in bond fund fixed instruments, fixed income instruments. And at the same time, they have to think about being out a little bit further on the risk-reward profile, right? So they will allocate about 4% of their portfolio to the alternative asset class. What's in there? It's private equity, it's venture capital. And even though 4% doesn't sound like a big number, when you're talking about $295 billion, it becomes a very big number. And so from pension funds, endowments, increasingly family offices, and increasingly corporations, we're getting funding coming in to these venture capital funds. Now, tonight I'm not really going to talk about small venture capital funds. I'm going to talk about funds that I consider to be institutional venture capital funds, who can attract money from CalPERS, who can attract money from the trustees of Stanford University. As Prashant and I know, it's very, very difficult to raise money from these institutions, but if you can, as a company, get money from a venture firm that has institutional investment, then you're really kind of in the big time, in the sense that you're taking money from people who have had a track record of success over time in delivering returns to these kinds of investors who really demand a return, and it's where you want to be. So that's just one premise for tonight, which is when I talk about a venture capital firm, and I'll take questions later, you can talk about smaller things, but I'm talking about institutional venture capital firms, Sequoia, Kleiner, Benchmark, etc. Okay. That money comes into the venture capital limited partnership, and I just put a little placeholder in there for the general partner entity of the limited partnership. That is the entity that manages the affairs of the venture fund, and that is populated by 1, 2, 3, 4 or more managers. Some people call them general partners, but they are the managers of the venture firm and make the determinations about where to invest and when. Prashant will like this stuff. So this is what it's like inside. I should have just made like a zoo, but I didn't. I brought actually more order to this slide than really exists inside these entities. But within the venture fund, you've got your partners, but then there are a whole bunch of people who have jobs that are very, very important to support not only the initial sourcing of companies, investments, but also the managing of the companies as they're going forward, helping them with all kinds of operational issues, and also helping these companies as they grow. So we have associates who do most of the work in terms of research. We have advisors, and typically these are outside advisors that are given some economic interest in the fund in order to get their advice about things, or they could just be paid. There's a class of partner called a venture partner, which is not one of the general partners or one of the direct managers, but somebody who may have an economic deal with the firm whereby they have some portion of carried interest on particular deals that they bring to the firm, or they may have, some other economic deal. But, venture partner means not a partner. It means some other kind of partner. More and more venture firms are having things that are called scouts, which are basically people who have been empowered by the venture firm to make investments on its behalf, small investments, relatively small investments on its behalf. So as you can imagine, most really good institutional venture firms have a lot of entrepreneurs who have been successful within their system. And I'm going to describe in a little while the process that venture firms go through to source and vet deals that are coming in, investments that are coming in. I don't like to use the word deals. Investments that are coming in. And what you'll see from that process is that it takes some time. It takes some time. But often these very small, very young companies, nascent companies, need investment right away. And so these people are empowered on behalf of the larger venture fund to just go ahead, cut it a check, get a relationship going, so that if you really believe in this and we really trust you, put some money into this company on our behalf, and we'll have kind of a placeholder, or we'll have a relationship with that company. A lot of firms have people they call EIRs. In some places that means executives in residence, and that would be ex-CEOs of companies. In other places it means entrepreneurs in residence. That means people who are coming off of a company that maybe was successful, thinking about what their next deal is going to be or the next company is going to be, and those people will get an office and a salary to just basically sit and look at new investment opportunities. And then it wouldn't be right if we didn't talk about staff. Most of the staff in venture firms are astonishingly good because it's a pretty good lifestyle, and you'll see that there's pretty good money in being a staff person at a venture firm, and so the level of staff, the professionalism of staff at venture firms is really good. Let's talk a little bit about the external economics of the venture firm. So this is the relationship between the venture firm and its investors. So if you're an investor in the venture firm, what do you care about? You want returns. I gave you $1. How much did you give me back? That's the fundamental economic question. From the standpoint of a venture capital investor, people talk about internal rate of return and what's your hurdle and that. But fundamentally, I gave you $1. How much did you give me back? Right? And you'll see that if you give back a lot of dollars from the $1 that you got, you can do very well. So we have a category of payment called management fees. This is designed to be relatively fixed and to pay the overhead of the venture firm. And just the range here is sort of 2 to 3% per year based on the committed capital. And that goes down over time. But just to run a little bit of a math example on that, arithmetic, so 2.5% on a $400 million 10-year fund is 25% of the fund. So that's $100 million of that committed capital, or $10 million a year, will be paid in management fees to the managers of the venture firm. Now, you're going to have staff, you're going to have all those people that we talked about on the previous slide, but in any event, you can see that
Second one is not working.
what looks like salary, your management fee, is pretty good.
Back to the other side.
Fund 4 was a $400 million. The second part of the second major part of the economic relationship is what's called the carried interest, which is basically a percentage of the equity gains, if there are any, should have put that in there, for each investment. And that runs sort of 20 to 35% based on the previous performance of the venture fund. And if it's 25%, just to do a little arithmetic, if the fund owns 25% or 20% of a $1 billion exit, that's $200 million. Not necessarily $200 million in gain, but it's just $200 million that are coming in. $150 million would go to the LPs, $50 million would go to the general partners or the managers. And of course, that's divided internally in many ways. So as you can see, you've got, for successful venture firms, you have management fees. They're good. You have carried interest, which is really good. And then guess what else? You can stack funds on top of each other. So you can do fund 1, and before fund 1 is done, you can start fund 2. And before fund 2 is done, you can start fund 3. So you can be getting management fees and carried interest from as many funds as you can run at a time. So pretty good business if you're successful. You know, if you're not successful, it's you do have to put some capital risk. I put that down there in the corner. Economic relationships involve a hurdle. If you don't get to a certain return, then you don't get any carried interest at all. And they often have things that are called clawbacks, which basically say, look, if in the early going of the fund, you took out a whole bunch of profit, you, Mr. Managers, you, Mr. General Partners, and you didn't do well later, then we're going to look at the fund economics on a whole fund basis, a 10-year basis. And if you've actually taken more money out of the fund than you quote unquote should have, then we're gonna claw it back. Okay, does that make sense? Any questions so far about venture, internal economics, external economics? Let me say one more thing about relative economics, because this becomes important when you are talking to a venture investor. Yes, sir.
So when a VC raises a fund, a certain amount of fund, and when the raising of the fund is complete, they are also under pressure to invest.
Yes.
The earliest.
Yes.
Because there is a cost that is being carried over with each fund that they are raising.
Very much so, but let me make a distinction. This is committed capital, it's not called capital, so you call it as you spend it. But your point is really the fundamental point that I'm trying to get across to everybody today, which is venture capitalists want to put money to work. They want to put money, they have to put money to work, right? Money that is sitting in the committed capital part of somebody's ledger is not doing anyone any good, right? And so that really influences the relative balance of power when you get a term sheet. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Another thing that influences whether you're going to get a term sheet is the sway or the internal power of the individual that you're dealing with within the venture firm. There's a tendency to think, well, you know, I'm dealing with the managing partner of the venture firm. This person has tremendous track record. They can just on their own say so, go ahead and make an investment on behalf of the firm. Not true. Every venture firm has a meeting, most of them are on Monday mornings, at which the whole group makes decisions about what they're going to invest in. Now, like any group of humans, kindergarten all the way up to venture capital,
Much better.
it has that sort of recess dynamic to it, right? Which is who has sway, who has success, who is perceived as being individually successful. So in the venture world, we have this thing called the Midas list that is put out by Forbes. And it basically ranks people by their returns, their individual returns. Now, is it accurate? It's like all these lists, you know, it's kind of, as between 1 and 2, probably doesn't matter, but as between 1 and 50, yeah, there's a difference between those two people. But just getting on the list is great, because there are a tremendous number of venture capitalists. So, if you're perceived as being a person who consistently delivers excess returns, then you have sway within your partnership. Not only do you have an external sway. Prashant and I were in a firm where everybody kind of said everything they wanted to say, and then one person made the decision at the end. I've never seen that before. And that affects individual compensation. In other words, the percentage of those things I talked to you about before, right? Some venture firms, many of them, the one that Prashant and I were at, it was just even Stevens. We're just going to divide this up evenly. That's very rare. So all compensation is relative, right? It's relative to what the next person in the next office has. Do I feel good about my compensation? Well, tell me what the person next to me has, and I'll tell you whether I feel good about my compensation. Because he takes too many vacations. And he should not be making mistakes.
This is good.
So that is one reason that we have differing internal economics within venture firms. Okay, so are you getting a sense of what the internal dynamic is? Okay, Hank, you told me this, who cares? Well, it matters because it matters to you as an entrepreneur in understanding what's going on within the venture firm that leads to your term sheet. We are getting to term sheets, but this is where they come from. What's the internal process? You source. Yes, sir.
I think you want to talk about individual compensation. I mean, how is that determined within the firm itself?
There's a lot of wrestling, and I'm somewhat facetious about that, but it really is that kind of discussion, usually among the founding partners, about how the compensation should be allocated. Because ultimately, if you don't do it correctly, and no one does a really great job of it, but if you don't do it correctly, people will leave. They will absolutely leave.
No, the question was salary-based versus incentives for the particular investment. Is there a relationship there? Between salary and incentives for recommending the particular?
No, it's all results. I gave you $1, how much did you get back? You told me, Hank, that you wanted to put $4 million to work in this company over here. Okay, we said go ahead, you went ahead. How much did you get back? $3 on a $4 million investment? Not good. Or, guess what? There are negative numbers in investing. I never knew that before I went to the venture firm. All right, you can come out negative. How can you come out negative? Stick with me. I'm going to get you to negative numbers on an investment. Okay, so what do? We'll just go quickly through this slide. You source investment opportunities. You screen them. You look, or you have associates who look at every aspect of the possible investment, including the technology, the market, the team, the growth of the market, the total available market, all the things that everyone should look at when they're thinking about investment. You make a market map. What's it going to take for this company to succeed? Who are their friends? Who are their foes? Who are their competitors? Who are their allies? Who are their natural allies? Is that a market space that we as a venture firm know something about? Do we know people in that market? Can we go to a big company that might be a huge customer in that market and talk to their CIO and find out whether this is a product that person will buy? In other words, do we have expertise that really will allow us to make a good decision about whether to invest in this company or not? And smart venture firms will say, we don't know anything about that. This looks like a great company, but we don't know anything about this space as investors, and so we should stay out of it. On the other hand, we've done 6 deals in the analytics space, and we feel really great about our knowledge in analytics, and this looks like a really good analytics company, and you know what? We know a lot about analytics, so we should go ahead and invest in this space. So sort of knowing what you know from a venture capital perspective is really important. You go through your evaluation, and then there's this really important process called socialization. What's socialization? Socialization is going around from office to office. It's meeting with your partners and saying to them, I have developed a conviction about this particular investment. I like this market, I like the team, I like where they are. I'm gonna sponsor an investment here because I have a really good idea about this company in terms of its success. And that is that can be a long process. That's the reason that things sometimes take a very long time to percolate within a venture firm. Because literally people are meeting with their partners prior to that big meeting that we talked about. And they're saying, look, I'm gonna bring this to the partnership next Monday. And I think it's a great investment. Let me tell you why I think it's a great investment. So there's this internal socialization process that goes on. And then we have a vote, but usually the socialization process is so thorough that if something's not gonna get approved, the person who's promoting it knows it before he or she presents it to the full partnership, and it never gets there, right? So by the time something gets to a full partner vote, the person who's promoting it usually knows that it's gonna go okay, although Prashant and I have seen many situations where someone went in thinking, yeah, we're gonna get this, and walked out, no. Now, if the partnership decides we're going to do this, these are the managers, that we're going to go make this investment, they give the authorization to the particular manager to go issue a term sheet, okay? So this is why things take a long time, this is what's happening, and what has happened at that point is directly related to what you said earlier. Once the venture firm has made a determination that it is going to issue a term sheet, that it wants to make that investment, within limits, which I'll tell you about in a minute, as an entrepreneur, all of the leverage is now moved to you. You've been going around and meeting with venture firms for 6 months, nobody's been moving, nothing's happening. Finally, someone really understands your story, someone really takes the time to figure out where you are and why this is a valuable investment. In addition, they manage to go socialize with their partners to the extent that their partners are ready to make an investment. And they call you up and say, after their Monday meeting, they say, listen, come on in tomorrow, we're going to issue your term sheet. We want to tell you how we want to make an investment. Yeah.
I would assume, correct me if I'm wrong, is by the time as a VC wishes to see an entrepreneur, wouldn't he already do source, screen, and already have market map also in his mind before he actually sees the company?
The investor or the entrepreneur?
Repeat the question.
The investor.
Yeah. So the question was, do investors have market maps in their mind before they work with the investor, before they meet the investor? In other words, are you looking for particular opportunities within a particular market? Yes and no. The yes answer is that you want to, as I said, be in markets that you know, right? So Hummer Winblad, the firm we were in, was a very successful enterprise software investor. They knew the enterprise software space incredibly well. They knew all the buyers, they knew all the sellers, they knew what it was going to take to make a successful company, and they could move very confidently and very quickly in that space because they kind of knew everybody. They could call 10 people, oh yeah, if we had that, we'd buy it. Absolutely, okay? So that gives you a lot of confidence about what you're doing. If you don't have that, you shouldn't go forward. So that's generalized market map. But you can get smart, and you should become, one of your skills as a venture firm is getting smart about new markets. And so that process of analysis is really important. And it allows you to transition. Because if you are you're stuck in a market map, as we all know, markets change. They're constantly changing. And if you as a venture firm don't change with the markets, things may not turn out very well. So you get the term sheet out and eventually make the investment. From the company's perspective, this process, a lot more frustrating. You pull together your presentation, you understand what you're doing, and by the way, I left out the whole makeup product that really works and is very attractive. That's a whole other. I'm just talking about the financing side. You go out and you make some contacts, you get some meetings. Then there's another process of socialization where essentially you're trying to see what the venture, and this is if the process is done right, this is sort of an ideal situation. You find a venture capital person or a firm that resonates with the opportunity. They've been there before, they understand why you think it's a great opportunity, and they agree with you on it, okay? You're not fighting it, you're not trying to convince them this is great. They go, oh yeah, we know this guy, and we know that guy, and we think that this is a really good space. You have a good idea here. And when you get that kind of a response, you should take the time to really do a mind meld with the people in that firm. What do you think about this? What do you think about this product? A, because you're going to learn from them, and B, you're going to get them excited about the opportunity. It doesn't happen all that often, and you kiss a lot of frogs. But eventually, you should be able to find somebody for whom your opportunity resonates. Let me just add one thing here, because it comes up a lot, is sort of the role of the founder. And that's not really why we're here tonight, we're talking about term sheets, but founders are really important because they sort of wear three hats. They are employees of the company, they are, in many cases, board members of the company, and they're stockholders of the company, all at the same time. And sometimes those roles diverge, what you're supposed to be doing in different roles diverge. So I would encourage you, those of you who are entrepreneurs, you're founders, you've been starting companies, that when you talk to your legal counsel or when you're reading, just try to keep in the back of your head, how would I feel about that as a board member? How would I feel about that as an entrepreneur, as an employee of this company, and how would I feel about that as an investor, a stockholder in this company? One thing while you're going through the socialization process you should think about is, the phrase that people use is that 2 investors are a board and 1 investor is a boss, right? And you don't want to have a boss, you want to have a board. You want to have people that are working together to try to help you build your company. And so having just 1 investor early in a company is risky. It's not that you shouldn't do it, and we all know a lot of situations where it's been very successful. But you really have to feel good about that person that you're working with, and you have to feel good about what they're going to be doing with you. Okay. We'll go quickly through why it takes so long. This is sort of a summary of what we just talked about. The promoting partner, what's their sway? How big is the market perceived to be? And also, what are their other possible investments? Rashawn and I used to get the question all the time, you passed on our investment, why did you pass? And the answer, we do give people feedback, and it's really good to give people feedback, but a lot of times the real answer is, we had better. We had a better investment down at the other end of the table. And, we can only stand to talk about 5 possible investments on that Monday morning, and yours just wasn't as good as the others. So it's not about, a lot of times, it's not about what you're doing individually, it's what you're doing relative to other possible investments. Of course, there's issues like the location, experience of the team, what stage is this at? Many venture firms specialize in different stages. You could be later stage, growth, you would not invest unless the company had good revenues, maybe even profitability, maybe. Or early stage investments, seed stage investments. So make sure you understand where you are and that you match up with the investors that you're talking to, because it doesn't do any good for a later stage company to go to a seed investor, or for a seed stage company to go to a later investment. One factor that's kind of overlooked a lot, and you should ask people this, is where are you in the life of your fund? In other words, the fund that you are investing right now, when did you raise it? When did you close it? Why does that matter? Well, it's human nature. When people start a fund, they do a little bit more investing than they do when they're at the tail end of the fund. Okay? Why? They're feeling good about their opportunity. They're feeling good about their prospects, and they want to put money to work. Okay? So just, with all else being equal, do you agree with this? With all else being equal, the earlier in the fund someone is, the higher the probability that they're going to be making an investment. And of course, there are macro trends, right? We all get up in the morning and read the papers. If the papers are sad, nobody's feeling good about making an investment. Of course, interestingly enough, that's the best time to be making an investment, right? Because the valuations are down. The people who are out there pushing their companies are dyed in the wool, die hard. We're not going to ever give up entrepreneurs. And that's what you want to do. If you look at the, our partner Ann Winblad used to have a slide that looked at all of the economic downturns over the last 30 years, and she would just pinpoint when companies were started, Microsoft, Apple, FedEx, you know, all in economic downtimes. Because, you know, that the people who are starting companies in those periods are really, really dedicated. Just go a little bit through the process internally about deciding what to offer. As I said, it's pretty much dictated by the people sitting around the table, but it has to do with valuation. I'm going to come back to valuation in a minute. What does the company really need to operate between now and the time that there's been some risk reduction in the company? Remember, companies are, someone once said, races against time to increase value and reduce risk, right? So how do you reduce risk? Well, you get sales. You get a product that's out in the marketplace. You have financial risk, you have market risk, you have a human, you know, employee risk. There are all kinds of different risks. You have to reduce risk. That's what the entrepreneurial process is about. So how do you do that? How do you reduce risk? What's it going to take to get to a next round for this company? So this idea of what you raise is not just kind of pulled out of the air, how much money this company should raise. It's how much does this company need to reduce risk the way we want it to reduce risk such that we can then move on to the next round. Okay? So you get a term sheet, it's great, but this is the key point right here in the upper left-hand corner. The partner or the person who's tasked with getting this deal done now has the go-ahead to put the money to work, you know, within bounds. The partners have said, we want to do this investment. You know, typically no one gets into, is it this valuation or this valuation, maybe it's just, you get a range. And then the person goes out and wants to issue a term sheet, so they issue a term sheet. What should you do? You say thanks, and you meet with the investor very soon. I always used to present term sheets in person. I would never just throw it over the transom, because you want to sit there and walk through with the entrepreneur. Here's why we did this. We say you should raise $4 million. You think you need $6 million. We think you need 4. Let us tell you why. As an investor, and it's really important to be in person to do that. But you got to be careful as a venture investor in a competitive situation. The first round of Amazon, Jeff Bezos wanted $4 million, and some venture capitalists I knew only thought he needed $3 million. And John Doerr said, you know, I'll give you $4 million. And yeah, we all know how that turned out. So these things everybody pretty much understands. Go talk to the lawyer, go get good counsel. But the key thing that and I'll keep telling you this 4 or 5 times here, is move quickly. You have to move quickly once the term sheet is out there, because the last thing you want is for the venture firm to go stale on the opportunity to make the investment. I don't know if you guys know this, but there's a curve to every commercial transaction, whether it's investment, doesn't matter. People get excited about it. They're really excited. You better close right here, because inevitably there comes, are we doing the right thing? I don't really like these guys. Why am I in this deal? Okay? And they're gone. And so if you don't, there's a thing called the meeting of the minds, right? It's like, okay, we're at the high point right here. Everybody go, 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 go. Yes, okay. If you don't close right then all of a sudden it's, you know, he wore that shirt 3 times. You know, why are we doing this? You know, I don't really like these guys.
So how quick is that quick?
Well, look, I think by the time a term sheet gets issued, you know the venture firm pretty well, you should. And they should know you really well. So, and you should know how much you want to raise, and you should know a pretty good idea about what the terms are going to be in terms of what percentage of the company that money is going to buy. And that's kind of those are the fundamentals. Everything else, as you're going to see here, Deborah's going to kill me. Everything else you see is kind of boilerplate, kind of. It's
Okay,
like,
I have a question.
yeah, go ahead, Deborah.
So talk a little bit about, though, what you have to do to try to get all the term sheets coming in and around the same time. You've got a couple of professionals.
Yeah, so that's a
that
good point.
keep people excited.
You know, in a dream scenario, you get 3 or 4 term sheets at the same time, right? I talked about that process of socialization where you're meeting with a bunch of different people. You have suitors, it's all kind of going along, they're bubbling along at the same time. Once in a while, you get 2 or 3 term sheets in the same week. whoa, amazing. Or you'll get a term sheet and you'll say, before you've signed any kind of a no-shop clause, you'll say to the other people, yeah, we have some term sheets coming in, you know? And that gets everybody excited, and they think, well, maybe we want to be in this too. So there is a sense of, you should try to orchestrate things, right? I mean, in the acquisition scenario, or any contract that you're negotiating, you gotta have an alternative, right? If you don't have an alternative, then you're gonna end up with sort of the worst deal in the world. But you have to have an alternative. So, did that answer your question? I mean, I don't know that people can really orchestrate that. Let me tell you one thing that I would not do, and I'll say it again later. I would not shop a term sheet. So if you get a term sheet from someone, I wouldn't go out to the other venture capitalists that you've been talking to and go, you know, Susan, the partner at this firm, gave me this. I don't really like her, but you know, I would rather do this deal with you. If anybody ever said that to me, I'd be like, yeah, I'm done. I don't really want to have a relationship with you.
How do you orchestrate or negotiate a term sheet where you're trying to get two investors?
We're trying to get two.
Multiple investors.
Yeah. So ideally, you're open with everybody about that desire. In other words, I don't think this is a deal for one firm. I think this is a deal for two firms. Let me tell you why. We need to raise a certain amount of money. I want one firm that's in this marketplace that understands these buyers. I want another firm that's over here. This would be my dream scenario if I had these two investors. So number one, be upfront about it, right? I want two investors. Then if inevitably somebody will be ahead of everybody else, right? And you say to that person, look, will you work with me to go get another investor? Because I think we need to have two. What do you think? And I've done many, many deals where people have committed to a term sheet, have even put in the money with the idea that, no, we're going to go get somebody else too. And we're going to, together, we're going to go shop this and try to raise more money, right? And in many cases, with an understanding that if we haven't been able to raise another $2 million within the next 30 days, then we'll put it in. Because we agreed to you need 4, we're going to put in 2, and we haven't found somebody else to take the other 2 in the next 30, 60 days, then we'll put in the next 2. So the key thing there is just be open and transparent about it. Nobody cares. Nobody gets defensive about having somebody else in. And in fact, from a venture capital perspective, and even from a company perspective, what is a company? How do you reduce risk? You reduce risk by having more people have a stake in your future, right? The more people that have a stake in your positive outcome, the better off you're going to be. You've taken a step forward in reducing risk. Yes.
Okay, so can you help me understand the psychology of we've got to a point where we thought it would be a good idea to raise money. We have several firms that have said that they would like to syndicate. So what's the difference between someone telling you that they want to be part of the syndication and willing to issue a term sheet? And
Yeah.
why is there
So this is-
resistance?
yeah,
What
this
does
is-
it mean?
Yeah, it means that they're chicken, right? Because it's easy to have conviction when somebody else has conviction.
Yeah.
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, so the question is, if people are saying to you, as I understand the question, if people are saying to you, we want to syndicate this, so we're happy to be part of the syndicate, but we don't want to lead, right? That we're not willing to be the lead investor. It's okay, it's good, thank you, really appreciate it. But you need somebody to be the bell cow, they call it, right? Somebody's going to walk out ahead of the herd and say, look, I have conviction about this company, and I'm willing to put my reputation as an investor and my chances of being on the Midas list, I'm willing to put that on the line because I believe I have conviction about this opportunity, right? And of course, the crazy thing is that people who are all milling around and not being willing to make a commitment, the minute somebody stands up and says, yes, I'm doing this, now everybody's in, right? And everybody's telling you why you shouldn't use the person that stood up and said, I will do this. Right? That's human nature.
But as an entrepreneur, would you recommend still spending time, because these people still spend time
No.
learning about it?
No. Go to a movie. That's a better use of your time. Hey, thanks. He's walking out. Let me just take you through the overview term sheets. How long are you going to go for, Sean? Let's do 7:50. Sure, that's good. Okay. So these are the things, and I'm gonna do this slide like a couple times, so don't, if it goes by fast, don't worry about it, you're gonna see it again. These are the basic provisions, and I took this directly from the National Venture Capital Association documents, right? Typically in a venture firm, you have 4 or 5 documents. There's actually like 30, but I don't wanna scare you. There's like 4 or 5, okay? And the basics are, when are we gonna close? Apropos of your point, right? When do we get the money? And this is all real interesting, and I've enjoyed your dinners, and it's been fun, but when do we get the money, okay? Who's gonna invest? What's the price per share gonna be? And that's, of course, related to the valuation. Now, I'm not gonna drill down on pre-money, post-money. Everybody understand that? Is there anybody who doesn't understand that? You want? Yeah? Okay. So, I'm happy to talk about it
Go ahead
after.
and explain it anyway.
I'll explain it anyway? Sure. I'm gonna buy half your company for $5 million. What's your pre-money valuation? Okay, after I put my $5 million in for half your company, what's your post-money valuation? $10 million. Because I said the existing equity was worth 5, I'm gonna put in 5, and I'm gonna take half the company. That's 10. Okay, so pre-money is before the money comes in. What are we saying the equity is worth? All of the equity. We're saying it's all worth $5 million. After I put my $5 million in, we're going to say it's worth 10 because we valued the pre-money at 5, post is 10. Okay? It's never that simple. But it's arithmetic. And by the way, when you talk about valuation, I said $5 million pre-money. Does that mean the company is worth $5 million before I put my money in? No. I say 10 million post. Does that mean the company's worth $10 million when I'm done? No. Okay. What a company's worth is what you could go sell it for tomorrow. That's what a company is really worth. So when you talk about valuation, all you're talking about is arithmetic. You're talking about the arithmetic sums that get you to, I'm going to buy N% of your company for this amount of money. It's like the profit, right? Those shows, TV shows. It's like that. It's simple stuff. And then we have a capitalization table. I'll show you one in just a second. In the charter is a very important document. It gets filed with the Secretary of State, usually in Delaware, and it's got the basic rules in it for the corporation. It is the certificate of incorporation. It is the charter. Okay. And it's important because it defines the relationships among the various stockholders, the various classes of stock. What do they get to do? What are their rights, preferences, and privileges? That's what's in the charter. And you get into this stuff called a liquidation preference, which is basically that we, as venture capitalists, want not to get common stock. We want to get preferred stock. And believe it or not, it's to the benefit of the founders, for the investors that are coming in, to get preferred stock. Why? The overhang of that preferred stock means, by overhang I mean they get their money out first. The overhang of that preferred stock means that the common stock is now worth a lot less. Why is that good for the founders? It allows them to give equity incentives to new people coming into the company at a way lower price than what was paid for the preferred stock. Right? So that's really valuable. Any questions about that? It's kind of the basic thing for the last 50 years. Yeah.
Question about dilution.
Yeah.
Typically you see that many rounds of funding dilutes the stock. So does that have any impact on preferred stock as well?
Yes. So, but the one thing that the preferred holders have that the common holders don't have is money. Right? So a preferred holder, and they have a right under the investor rights agreement to take their pro rata share of additional rounds that are coming in. So they don't have to suffer dilution. They have to pay, but they don't have to suffer dilution. Whereas as an employee, as a founder, unless you find some way through getting increased options or otherwise getting a deal recut by the investors, you're not going to be in a position where you keep the same amount of stock, which gets crazy if you've gone through a lot of rounds of financing. The famous story of Silicon Graphics, took a long time to go public, By the time that they went public, the original founders owned like 2-3% of the company, including Jim Clark. Right, to the point where when he went and then founded Netscape, he wouldn't let the investors from Silicon Graphics invest in Netscape. Why? Because he had been so diluted over time that once the company was successful, he didn't share in that success. Well, he did share in it, but he didn't share in it in anywhere near what he would have if the company had been successful.
Which also means that you should have lesser rounds of funding and try to be profitable.
Which means you should be successful immediately. Yes. Okay? Because there's a big price to be paid for not being successful. And cynical venture capitalists, you know, not the good ones, but the cynical ones, will say, serves them right. Right? They didn't make this company successful fast enough. They got diluted. We had to put in all this extra money to get it to a point where it was worth something. Serves them right. Most venture capitalists will never say. But do you see what I'm saying? It's, as I say, it's a race against time to reduce risk and create value. Right? And the time element is really important. There's a whole class of entrepreneurs out in Idaho that start a company, get it to $2 million in revenue, and sell it for $10 million. Go do it again. Right? It's the time value of money. We're just, instead of sitting around looking for a $30 million outcome or a $40 million outcome, you know, we're just going to keep doing this because time is really important, right? In terms of your overall returns. And the faster you are successful, the better off you're going to be. How did you get your own mic? Can I ask you that? Did you bring that from home?
How do you establish the relationship between the common stock valuation, price per stock versus the preferred stock? I mean, you know, so
Yeah.
we just talked about it, but how do you know after a round,
Yeah.
how to value?
Right. We used to always just use 10 to 1. Okay, so if preferred stock was $2, we would grant options for common stock at 20 cents. We don't do that anymore because the IRS came in, changed the tax code to say you have to have a valuation of that common stock. Or let me say it another way. You'll get a safe harbor on your valuation calculation if you use an outside valuation expert to tell us what the relationship should be. So that created an industry of valuation experts. Okay, who will tell you. Okay. Everybody's looking at this list and you've got it on your thing. Why don't you just ask me questions about this rather than me going through all these. Deborah, what do you think is the most important stuff there?
Voting thresholds amongst the parties.
Yeah, okay. So I think a really good thing to talk about briefly, and I'll come to your question, sir, is the voting agreement. The voting agreement is an agreement among the stockholders about how they're going to vote their shares. So that's pretty powerful, right? We're all going to agree right now about how we're going to vote when things come up. One of the things that you agree on is board seats. You know, venture firm A, you're going to have a board seat. Venture firm B, you're going to have a board seat. We're all going to agree right now that we're going to vote you onto the board. There isn't going to be any question about that when election comes around. Another thing we're going to agree on is that we're going to have a certain number of directors, and the common shareholders are going to be represented on that. And probably the CEO is going to be guaranteed a slot on the board. That's going to be done in the voting agreement. We're all going to vote that way, right? Also in the voting agreement, you'll have what's called a drag-along right in many companies. And what that is an agreement that says, look, if we get an offer to buy this company, and that offer is approved by the board of directors, and it's approved by some percentage of the stockholders, or maybe certain individual stockholders, then everybody who has signed this agreement is going to vote in favor of that. All right? So this is a very powerful thing. Why? Because it prevents everybody who has signed it from saying, I really don't want to do this deal. Right? Now, the triggers for it can be, you know, you can move those around. Board, stockholder, Series A has to have the Series B, has to have 2/3 of the Series C. You know, there's lots of different ways you can, or you could even say that the founders have to agree. Right? However you set it up, the fact that you've got that mechanism in place means that when all those people agree that there's going to be a deal, when all those things line up, then the smaller holders can't hold out and thereby kill the deal. What else should I talk about?
Whether all the series vote together, or whether you have series votes for like amending the charter.
Right. So, and this is something that is negotiated a lot, not between the founders and the investors, but among the investors, which is investors who come in later want to have greater rights than investors who came in earlier. Investors who come in when it's right, like it's right now, and it's rocky times, and they're making a big investment. They want better terms than what the earlier people had, and so often it's in it's reflected in the charter, but it can be also in the voting agreement, investor rights agreement, what percentages of the various series of stock we have to have in order to effect certain things. Capitalization, selling their stock, that sort of stuff.
Liquidation preferences also.
What are we seeing for liquidation preferences and anti-dilution right now?
Sure. Well, so let me explain both of those. So there was a venture firm here that I really liked called Sutter Hill. And in the early days of Sutter Hill, they bought the same stock that the founders had. Their idea was, we want to be exactly aligned with the founders. We're going to get common stock. Well, that didn't serve this purpose of setting up a differential between the preferred and the common, such that we could sell common stock relatively cheaply to the preferred stock. So they went to a system where they said, well, we're going to have preferred stock, but that's all we're going to have. That's the only right we're going to have. We're just going to have a preference in our stock. What has evolved is a system where almost every deal now is a preferred stock deal. All the money that comes in gets preferred stock. Now, nowadays, they just have a right to get 1 times their money back. And they have a right to either get that 1 times their money back or convert over into common. So if they're better off to be common shareholders, they'll convert to common and they'll take their common. In bad times, and we're coming up on bad times, you can get 2 times your liquidation preference or 3 times your liquidation preference. And when things are really shaky, you can get what's called a participating preferred, which basically says you get your money back and then you participate pro rata with the common after you've gotten your money back. So sort of 2 bites at the apple, if you will. We haven't seen participating preferreds for a long time. I'm sure they'll come back. These things, for everything. Pardon?
Some of the angels do them.
Yeah. Participating preferreds? Yeah. I feel like I missed a question.
Anti-dilution, what do we?
Oh, yeah, on anti-dilution. So investors will typically negotiate for some kind of downside protection. And the easiest one to understand is what's called full ratchet. So I paid $3 for this stock. And then the company went out 6 months later and sold basically the same stock for $2. How do I feel about this? I feel bad. I feel like my stock should cost $2, and I should get more stock because of the fact that I invested before these guys, and they got it cheaper than I did. Well, a lot of things have happened in the meantime, but okay. But if you negotiated for what's called a full ratchet, your stock will be repriced, i.e. you'll get more shares or you get more conversion rights based on that new price. So that's pretty good. We don't do full ratchet much around here anymore. What we do is a weighted average formula, and it's based on a mathematical formula that only Deborah understands. One of the few people to really understand. It's just a math formula that says, we're not going to give you a full ratchet, but we're going to give you a percentage based on the amount of capital that's outstanding, based on the number of shares that are outstanding. And in the NVACA materials, there's a full algorithm and lots of factors, and there are like quotients and numerators and denominators. It's a lot of fun. But that's how we do it now. We do a weighted average anti-dilution calculation if there's a down round following the round. Okay? All right, let me wrap this up and then we'll take some questions. This is a cap table. If you're going to be an entrepreneur, you should get good at the cap table. After you go through a number of rounds of financing, and you'll set up a model for yourself. I bet you'd get one from Prashant. You'll set up a model for yourself that'll show various rounds of financing at various prices, various valuations of the company, and basically scenario planning. How much am I going to own in this company if we have to raise $100 million to get where we're going? You know, what's my percentage if I have to raise it at various valuations? So that's a spreadsheet that's really worth having. You got one? Okay, Prashant says he can find one for you if you want to see a form. It starts with this. This is the most basic form, and this is in the NVCA documents. Okay, let me just go through this for the ending. What do you do if you get a term sheet? You have to move quickly, because what I said, everybody falls out of love some period of time. Why are we here? Right? So you want to get this at the top. You want to get this top. Everybody's feeling good about it. That's the best kind of financing. All right, so you have to move quickly. I tell people, pick 5 things to negotiate. You know, if they're, don't come into a negotiation saying, oh man, there's like 30 points we have to get, and you know, we have to worry about this and that and the other thing. Just talk to your lawyer, figure out what the 5 most important points are and get those.
So what do you do when you have 2 term sheets, like, and what is a slightly different valuation? And then what basically should I look in the term sheet provision?
Be open about it, talk to the people about it, come up with a fair valuation, and do it. Something in the middle. Having 2 term sheets is really good, right? And unless there's some overriding reason why you would only take one, and sometimes people condition their term sheets on, we're going to be the only investor, but unless there's some overriding reason why there's only one, it reduces everybody's risk to have 2 investors. And you want to have them on the same terms, so get everybody together, agree on some terms, and go forward. That's a really good problem to have, you know, and you should be able to work that out in like 2 hours. That's not a problem. Yeah.
When a partner gets an approval to go and give a term sheet to the entrepreneur or the company, you mentioned there is some UI which you get from this board to negotiate. What is the typical percentage on both sides?
It's not so much driven by what the partners said. It's driven by the experiences of the firm as to what percentage of a company they need to hold in order to be successful down the road. In our firm, we always said we wanted to have 15% of the company, a little bit more, 20% of the company at a minimum. So if we couldn't figure out a way, based on the cash needs of the company and the other investors that were coming in, if we couldn't figure out a way to get 20% of a company, it's probably not worth our time to do that investment. Even though it may be a very good investment, but if we end up owning 10%, then we've got to do a lot more investments to invest our $400 million, right? But if we can invest 20% or 30% or even 40%, you know, for a certain amount of money, then it's more worth our time because we're a bigger owner. Okay, so it's not really driven by, my boss told me I can only do this. It's really about our model as a fund is that we have to have it this way. And I think most funds would tell you 15 to 30, 40. There is a fund that starts all their term sheets at 80%. We have to have 80%. Are these the right investors? Do we need other investors? And I think you got to ask yourself, if we're not done in 10 days, why are we not done? Right? What's going on here that's taking so long? Because these things, you know, how many pages? It's 4 pages, something, right? And the people you're talking to are very sophisticated about what they're doing. So if you can't get this thing done in a couple days, then something going on. Okay, so what I was trying to get across here is the context of the investor. I didn't spend a lot of time going through individual provisions. I think you can get those off of the NVCA site and the book I talked about. Move quickly, don't shop a term sheet, but absolutely talk to more than one firm. Okay, that's a recap of what we said. Oh, look at this guy, he's so good looking. I'm happy to take some questions if anybody has some. That's the end of my talk.
So I had a quick question. I know how the Valley works. Can you sort of point to the difference between the East Coast guys and the Valley guys?
Yeah, I would say in general, the East Coast is a little bit more conservative about everything. Valuations, I would say, are lower. Remember that Massachusetts and New York both enforce post-employment covenants not to compete. We don't enforce those in California. In my view, and I come from Michigan where I've tried to get this legislation passed many times, the best thing about the California economy is worker mobility. People have the ability to move around. Right? And they have that because in our Constitution it says, we will not enforce a post-employment covenant not to compete. Well, what does that do? It allows people when they see a market, I'm going to get you a question in a minute. It allows people when they see a marketplace to leave their current employer and go attack that market, even if that market may be something that's competitive to their employer. They can't take the trade secrets, they can't take the confidential information, but they can use their basic skill set and go compete. All right, this is fantastic. They don't have this in Massachusetts. They don't have this in New York. Okay, and so to my view, it's just me talking. It's a slower process there. The valuations tend to be lower, and it's and even entrepreneurial companies, young early stage companies in those jurisdictions will put post-employment covenants not to compete in their agreements with their employees, and I'm not a big fan of that.
Right. I was actually curious about East Coast syndicate investing in a Valley company or something.
People generally like to be geographically close to their investments, and I think that's wise, actually. I mean, people around here say that you want to be able to drive over to the company and see what's going on, and I think that's a good thing. So it is one of these industries that's pretty local. Now, there are always exceptions to that. There are a lot of people who spend a lot of time on planes and they do well, but I would say in general, you want to invest somewhere close by. Does that answer your question?
Thanks, yes.
If you do Delaware incorporation, then which government is in effect? Is that West Coast or East Coast?
It was about Delaware, I'm sorry.
If you do Delaware incorporation, then will this East Coast government come?
Oh, so Delaware is you can incorporate in almost any state. Delaware is the favored place for incorporation because, for two reasons. One is it has been for a couple hundred years, the place where most commercial litigation goes on that involves stockholders. So the body of law there is very rich. So you can get an answer almost on any issue very quickly, whereas if you go look at the Nevada statutes and Nevada cases, there's nothing. So people like the richness of the law that's in Delaware. Delaware also tends to allow companies to kind of do what they want to do within a rule of reason and within the parameters of general business. It's very favorable to business, the Delaware statute. And Delaware has a great thing. They have a court of chancery that has a setup whereby if you've got a basic question about the governance of the company to the point where it's stopping the company from being governed effectively, you can get in front of a judge and get a hearing and get a decision in like 3 days. It's awesome. And remember when they had the fight over HP and the takeover and all that stuff, and everybody was in the Delaware Chancery Court before Judge Chandler, and that's a situation where you can write your briefs, you can fly to Delaware, you can get in front of the judge, you can spend a couple of days and have a very good, well-reasoned outcome that is consistent with Delaware law. So they do a lot of things too, and they get franchise taxes and other stuff that goes with it. But Delaware has really carved themselves out as being a place where they want people to incorporate. Yes, sir.
Thanks, Hank. So you talk about, like Series A, you're going to give up as an entrepreneur 20-30% of your company. Series B, maybe a similar amount. What's the right framework for us entrepreneurs to think about in terms of, at one point, do we lose control of this venture from a voting point of view? Voting rights aside, economic rights differently. What's the right framework? Because there's a role I have as a founder where I have to be in charge. But there's a certain point where I realize I've built something of value, and now I got to let the market run with my company, and I got to get the hell out of the way. How does one think about that these days?
It's really difficult to maintain that kind of control. because in many cases it has nothing to do with the percentage that you own, but it's all those covenants that we talked about, the promises that you made about approvals you would get from various people in order to do certain things. So you give up a lot of control, even in a scenario where you may own still 60, 70% of the company, you've given up a lot of control because you've brought in a professional investor. That doesn't really bother me. If you're in a scenario like Google where you have one round of venture financing, right? Or you're in a Facebook kind of a situation. There again, as we talked about earlier, the speed of the rise of the business is the thing that gives you tremendous power. Why? You don't need the capital. You know, we talked about Silicon Graphics. At the end of the day, the founders didn't own very much at all. Why? It took a long time and it took a lot of money. Okay. Google, opposite end of the spectrum. Facebook, opposite end of the spectrum. Didn't take a lot of money, didn't take a lot of time. So the best way to ensure that you're in that situation is to move quickly, because it's a race against time to add value and to reduce risk. Sir?
Could you tell about Facebook and Google's scenario where the investor could not control? What is the situation?
Well, in certain instances, you've got entrepreneurs who hold a large body of stock, and they are so important to the functioning of the business that they will go to the stockholders there, or the investors that are thinking about coming in and saying, we want to retain, all those covenants that I talked about, all the rights? No. No. And when the time comes to be a public company, even though we're going to have, numerically, we're going to have very fewer number of shares than what the public's going to hold, what other people are going to hold, we're going to set that up in a different class. And all of the rights associated with governing this business are going to be in that class and not in everybody else. And by the way, we're going to own all the stock in that class.
But when that declaration happens, at the time of going to public or long time before?
It's generally, I would say, it depends on the strength of the entrepreneurs, the strength that they have within the context of the funding. But this talk was a little bit about negotiating term sheets, about negotiating terms, and it's like any other situation. If you have a lot of leverage, as in this is the hottest company in the history of the world, and everybody wants to be in this deal, then you can demand things like control. You can demand things like dual class stock structure in which the entrepreneurs essentially control the rights of the business. So it is all relative, and it is all based on a perception of,
But can you do that later?
you can do it anytime. You can do it anytime. As soon as you get the power. Come on down. All right, everybody, thank you so much. Really good to see you.